We will now move into the financial portion of this class, and the first section is 8.1% sales tax and discounts. We already talked about this, but just a brief review. Remember to express a decimal as a percent. We move the decimals 2.2 places to the right and add a percent sign. So really you're multiplying by 100%, right? When you multiply by 100, you move it over 2. So 0.47 is 47%. It says express 0.023 as a percent. You multiply by 100 and the decimal moves there over 2 places. So that's 2.3%. Recall that to express a percent as a decimal, you move the decimal 2 places to the left and drop the percent sign. When there is no decimal point provided, it means it's right there, right? It's at the end of the number. So you move it over 2 places, right? Which is dividing by 100. 19% means 19 divided by 100, which is 0.19. Express 180% as a decimal. All right, so that's 180 divided by 100, which will move the decimal over 2 places, which is 1.8, which makes sense because the number 1 is 100%. So 1.8 is 180%. We also talked a bit about percentages and finding the percent of numbers. Remember that of means to multiply. Is or are translates to an equal sign. So anytime we see is or are, it becomes equal. Of is multiplication. And you let x or n equal the unknown, i.e. the what. Remember to change the percent to a decimal when you put it into the equation, or if you're actually finding the percent, your answer will be given in the decimal and you'll have to change it to a percent. So we're going to set these up with the percent equation. What percent of B is A, right? Means what percent of B, so times B, and that's what we're wanting to know. So the answer is P percent of B, so right, which is what we've done before in this class. When we want to know what percent of A is B, is becomes equal, of becomes time. So we want to know what percent of, right, which is times A, is B. We would set up the percent equation that way. A is P percent of what is the last one. So A is, which becomes equal, P percent of what? So A equals P percent of what? So examples, you know, and some people can just look at the examples and, you know exactly, okay, here I'm going to divide, here I'm going to multiply, that type of thing. But if you can't, just set up an equation. 6 is 15% of what? So you can imagine that your answer is going to be a lot more than 6 because 6 represents the 15%, right? So 6 is, which becomes equals 15%. And remember, when we change this, we have to change it to a decimal before we insert it into our equation. So 15% becomes 0.15. Of is times, and your what is your N or your X, whatever letter you want to use. And remember, when you want to solve, we want to find what is N, right, our unknown in our equation. Remember, you do the opposite operation. So since it's 0.15 times N, how you solve for it is dividing by 0.15. All right, that's how you get it on the side by itself. So N, and 6 divided by 0.15 is the left side. If you punch that in a calculator, you will get 12. No, that's not right, because that would be 50%. I must have punched it in wrong. 6 divided by 0.15 should be 40. All right, and see if your answer seems reasonable. A lot of times people just see the percent and just multiply it with the number that's given. We don't want 15% of 6, so we don't want to do 0.15 times 6. We want to know 15% of some big number is 6, so 40 makes sense. The next one is 24% of what number is 40.8%. So 24% of what number? Again, 24% you need to change to a decimal, which becomes 0.24 of, which becomes times what number becomes equals. And again, you know that this is like the last one. It's going to be larger than that. 24% of what is 40. So it's going to be much larger than 40. Again, you do the opposite operation to both sides. Since it's times, we divide both sides by that. Remember, don't subtract. You have to do the opposite of multiplication, which is division. 40.8 divided by 0.24 should give you 170. And part C, 3 is what percent of 15? So is becomes equal. 3 is what percent of becomes times of 15. So we want to solve this equation for n, since it's n percent times 15. To get the n on a side by itself, we have to divide both sides by 15. Remember, whatever you do to one side, you have to do to the other. If you hit 3 divided by 15 in the calculator, you should get 0.2. So you need to change that to a percent. When your answer is a percent, you're going to be given a decimal, and you're going to have to change it to a percent. If you're given the percent, you change it to a decimal. So we have to change this to a percent by multiplying by 100, which means for 0.2, if you multiply by 100, you move it over 2 places, it becomes 20%. 3 is what percent of 15? So that's 20%, which sounds reasonable, right? If you multiply 3 together 5 times, you get 15, and you do 20% times 5, that's 100. So that seems like a very good answer. Part D, what percent of 2.5 is 0.3? So this is going to be a very small percent, because if you think about if you have 2.5 and you want to know what percent of the 2.5 is 0.3, it's a small percent. So what percent of 2.5 is 0.3? So again, to get the variable on its side by itself, we do the opposite operation. .3 divided by 2.5 is 0.12, and again, that's not a percent. We need to change it to a percent by multiplying by 100. Boop, boop, 12%, which sounds like a reasonable answer. The percent formula in sales tax. We can use this formula to determine the sales tax collected on states, counties, and cities on sale of items to customers. The sales tax is a percent of the cost of an item. And you will see that different cities have different sales tax rates. You know, you could look up the sales tax rate of Carbondale, you know, just do a Google search or wherever you might live. So we do the tax rate expressed as a decimal times the item's cost. Suppose that the local sales tax rate is 7.5% and you purchase a bicycle for $894. Part A, how much tax is paid. We want 7.5% of the 894. You don't even need to think about it as a formula, right? You want a percent of something, so you know that you multiply, but you have to change a percent to a decimal by dividing by 100. 7.5% is not a decimal number, it's still a percent. So you still have to move it over 2 places. So it's 0.075. 0.075 of, which is times $894. All right, whenever you want a percent of something, that's what you do. 0.075 times 894. And the tax on this bicycle is $67.05. What is the bicycle's total cost? Well, it's the $894 plus the sales tax of $67.05 plus $894 should give you a total of $961.05. Price discounts. Businesses reduce prices or discount to attract customers and to reduce inventory. The discount rate is a percent of the original price. So the discount amount, you take the discount rate times the original price. A computer with the original price of $1,460 is on sale at 15% off. What is the discount amount? Again, you just take you want to know 15% of, which means times the 1460. We don't need any formulas. All right, 15% divided by 100 to change it to a decimal. 15% times 1460. Which should give you $219 is the discount amount. So what is the computer's sale price? So we take our original price minus the discount amount, and that should give you $1,241. Just make sure your answer seems to make sense. The last topic in this section is percent increase and decrease, which is a little bit harder than a basic percent problem. So just instead of finding what percent of 6 is 3, we want to know how much something went up or went down. So the thing to remember when you're looking at the percent increase or decrease is that you always divide by the original amount, not the smaller amount or the larger amount, because for a percent increase problem, right, if it went from $40 to $50, the smaller number is the original number. But if something is a percent decrease, it went from $50 to $40, this time the original amount is the $50, the larger amount. So we shouldn't think about it as larger or smaller, just the original amount. So to find the percent, you find the amount of the increase over the original amount. For percent decrease, the amount of the decrease over the original amount. And be sure to change it to percent form. So remember, if you're given a percent, change it to a decimal. If you're asked for a percent, you've got to change it back to a percent by multiplying by 100. A jacket regularly sells for $135. The sales price is $60.75. Find the percent decrease of the sale item from the original price. What is the amount of the decrease? And then what is the percent decrease? So don't do something like $60.75 over $135. You have to first figure out what the amount of the decrease is. It went from $135 to $60.75. So we need to find the difference in those two amounts, the dollar amounts. 135 minus 60.75, that should give you 74.25 is the amount of the decrease. And so the percent decrease, remember, is the amount of the decrease over the original amount. So the amount of the decrease is 74.25, and the original amount Again, not the smaller or the larger. You have to look for what it originally sold for, which was $135. If you punch that in the calculator, divided by 135, you will get 0.55. And this is not a percent. Remember, if it asks you for a percent, what is the percent of the decrease? You have to change it to a percent by multiplying by 100. 0.55 times 100 is 55%. I know that increasing from 2 to 8 is a 300% increase because you've gone up 3 more 2s, right? From 2 to 8, you've added 6, which is 3 more 2, so it's a 300% increase. Does that mean decreasing 8 to 2 is a 300% decrease? Remember that we don't say that. Our percent decrease should actually never be over 100%. So from 2 is increased to 8, right? If we use our idea that the amount of the increase, which is 8, from over the original, or is 6, sorry, from 2 to 8, that's 6. The amount of the increase is 6 over the original amount, which is 2, so that's 300%. When 8 is decreased to 2, again, we do the amount of the decrease over the original amount. The amount of the decrease is still 6, right? It's just going down 6 over the original amount. And this time the original amount is the bigger amount. So 6 divided by 8, if you punch that in a calculator, it's 0.75, so 75%. So from 8 to 2 is a 75% decrease, and from 2 to 8 is a 300% increase. And this last slide is just a mix of questions. Suppose that an exercise machine with original price of $860 is on sale at 12% off. What is the discount amount? So again, remember, we just want 12% of 860. We change it to a decimal by dividing by 100. Of means times. Whenever we want a percent of a number, we just change it to a decimal and multiply. So $103.20 is the discount amount. What is the exercise machine sale price? So we take the original amount minus the discount amount. And question 2, it says a shirt cost a store $20 to purchase and they sell it for $45. What percent is it marked up? So again, this is a percent increase problem. We don't want to know like what percent of 20 is 45. We want to know what percent is marked up. So that's an increase. So again, we want the amount of the increase divided by the original. Always divide by the original. So we have to first figure out how much it increased. Well, it went from $20 to $45. So that's a difference of $25. So 25 over the original amount. The original amount was the amount before the increase, which was $20. 20 divided by 25 is 1.25. It is not 1.25%. You can actually see if something costs $20 for the store and they sell it for $45. If you double 20, you only get to 40. So you know that it's over 100% increase because $40 would be 100% more than what it was, right? So you know that can't be 1.25%. You need to change this to a percent by multiplying by 100, which means move the decimal over 2 places. So it should be 125%. which makes perfect sense. Always read the question and see if it makes sense. That is the end of section 8.1.